thank you and good afternoon, everybody. We'll speak. Greg's got the answers to all the questions, so there we go. So thanks for listening to me. It's the last thing. I think we'll take about an hour or something like that. Keep everybody here really late, but it says on the screen 15 minutes, so let's get going. So, as the introduction says, it's a really good question is how do we adopt AI for good in DVSA? You know, I'm sort of move through the sort of slides, but one of the things that's come out of today that's really important, I want to cover before I hand over to the expert, which is Greg, is how we approach the governance for AI. It's a new thing. It's quite scary. You'll have heard today people talking about the risks of it. And one thing that was really important to me is we didn't want to hinder the innovation and the opportunity that AI had. And I think quite often there's a knee-jerk reaction to something that's new, that what we must do is put some rules around it. I mean, proper rules and proper governance boards and lots of paper. We chose not to do that. I think whatever we do, it's public money. So when I talk about the next thing, this isn't a world of anarchy. There are some rules and guidelines around it. We build things into, you know, the business processes. That'll come out loud and clear. And what I'm going to do is leap onto this slide here. And what you'll see is a radar approach to things. And what we decided to do was create a community of practice. So rather than create a governance board and have really structured, hard and fast rules, what I wanted was a community practice which is led by one of our delivery managers, not a director, not one of my colleagues. And we started to map out what we were doing with AI. And I think you have to have some really good eyesight to be able to see this, but this is just illustrative. So if I said we're doing 2 projects on AI, one of them's live and one of them's in the process of main, that radar does not reflect what's going on with that. So what we created in the community practice was a safe environment for the whole of the organisation to come forward without any real strict governance to say, tell us what you're doing. So the 2 projects that we've got, one of them is one of mine, which is about how we'll deliver theory tests at home. So you're going to have to wait a little while for that. And what we're doing in our customer service centre with some of the software in there, AI. But then we started to flush out of DVSA's business what else was going on using AI. And we were quite surprised. Actually, since I've done this, there's even more things that have gone on there. But how many products and how many pieces of software we have that have AI as part of that rule. So in doing that and getting a grip on it, and I think lots of organisations, if you were to really think how much AI do we have in the organisation, really get everybody together in the community and ask what you've got. Because when you map it out, it becomes really, really stark that AI is a bigger part of lots of operations and services that we first thought. So that's the radar. We mapped it, as you can see, from front office. And you'll see there's a big prominence of back office. This is where lots of AI has crept in without us really knowing about it. So we've got a really crystal clear picture now of what happens with it. And then what we've done, you know, we're civil servants. We then took all of those examples and sort of listed out what they did, how they worked. And what became really interesting is the amount of people in my organisation who were experts, the subject matter, didn't know they were using AI. So in the customer service centre, the NLP that we're using, it's the software. It's the piece of software that we have in the contact centre. Yes, but it's AI. Is it? Now, you know, we now have around 28 live AI products in there. But unless we created a safe environment to run this, and the reason I want to cover this is, if you don't have a safe space and the visibility for people to talk about AI and come forward with ideas, they'll start doing it anyway. It will happen and people will start doing things like that. So we want to avoid what I call the black ops of people doing AI and one day me waking up and being surprised. What I want to do, though, is rather than going about the governance, and hopefully you will learn that I think a soft approach to this is better than a hard and fast sort of rules, is I'm going to hand over to Greg, who's going to talk about how we use AI for the good. He is my expert, so Greg, I'm going to pass you the thing and step off the stage. Good luck.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm guessing a lot of you have probably seen our product before. If you're a driver and you've got your license in the UK, you've probably seen a theory test before. If you haven't seen it, maybe you've got a friend or a family member that's learning to drive and you're helping them on that journey. A little bit of a quick whistle-stop tour of what the theory test is. It is the world's largest computer-based high-stakes test. So to give that some kind of context, we actually delivered last year 3.7 million tests, of which 2.6 million tests were taken by car drivers. So it's a big enterprise. The rest of our tests being made with other categories like motorcycle, goods vehicles, passenger carrying vehicles, buses, taxis. Driving and riding instructors also have to do a qualification process, and driving examiners have to be qualified as well, which is probably quite reassuring for anybody doing a driving test. So if you're taking a car or motorcycle test, you'll be faced with 50 multiple choice questions, and somebody has to write those questions. That's my team. If you've done any of the practice questions, you might have thought, what kind of idiot actually writes these questions? Well, it's me. So apologies if you don't like the questions, but they are hopefully all fit for purpose. If you're doing another test, like a bus or a lorry test or a taxi test, you actually have to answer 100 questions. So it's quite a comprehensive test of knowledge. Questions mostly are based on the highway code. And if you're wondering how to pass the theory test, read your highway code. There is no better advice than that. We do use other source materials. The highway code is the one to start with, though. So there's the highway code. I don't think anybody's probably got a copy of that at home. That's the 1931 highway code. Okay, it contained 18 pages of advice for drivers. Okay, about 4,000 words. And at the time, it was a groundbreaking document. But of course, driving has changed over the years. We've got a lot more rules. Technology changes. So every decade, we get a rewrite of the highway code, and we get more and more content being put in. So it goes through the 50s and 60s. Apologies for anybody that did their test in previous years. This is giving you flashbacks, and you're going to give you nightmares tonight. Latest highway code there on screen. We've got two versions. We've got the Great Britain highway code, and we've got the Northern Ireland highway code. And when we're actually writing questions, we write questions for Northern Ireland as well. And we have to make sure that the questions are compatible in both territories, because they actually have different rules, which just adds a little additional complexity to the task. So how we used to write questions is we'd have a team of question writers, and we'd ask them to write 10 questions a week. And you think, well, that sounds like an easy gig. I could probably do that. But when you start doing this on a blank piece of paper, it's surprisingly difficult to do. Writing bad questions is really easy. But writing good questions is actually really hard. We have lots and lots of rules about questions, how they've got to be constructed and worded. So what we would do is write our questions, get together as a panel, and then we'd edit the questions to make sure they're fit for purpose. And that stage is quite stressful, because if you've spent all week crafting these beautiful 10 questions and your colleagues just pull them apart because they're no good, it can be a little bit of a tense situation, believe me. So it's not as easy as you might think. A quick flash of some of the rules we have to follow when we're question writing. So hopefully I've got this slide right. They're going to just whiz past. There we go. I'm not going to bore you with all the rules. One of the most important rules is accessibility. About 25% of our customers cannot access written information easily. We've got lots and lots of customers with reading difficulties. They're neurodiverse, ADHD. They might have working memory issues. So we've got to make sure we write at an accessible level. That's probably the most fundamental part of what we do. So when we've discovered ChatGPT, like many people have already said today, we were basically shocked by this thing. We were using it in secret because we thought if we tell anybody we're doing it, we won't be allowed to. So we kept the project very secret, and we learned how to write prompts to see if we could actually write questions using ChatGPT. And yeah, unsurprising that it can do it as well as a human. Maybe not better than a human yet, but it can do some pretty clever things. But what we do need at the end of the process is humans in the loop to fact check, because we still get that issue with hallucination. So no matter how good your prompt writing is, you'd need that human to check it, because it will still give you questions which don't work and are not supported by our source materials. So all the rules that I've just flashed up on the screen, we can write them into the prompt, and we'll get pretty close to where we need to be. It'll give us a very good starting point, gets us off the blank page, and it just makes us into question editors rather than question writers. So it makes our life much, much easier. So we just basically generate lots and lots of questions, get together as a team, pick the ones we like, reject the ones we don't. And we have quite a high discard rate. Maybe 50% of the questions that the AI will generate are not actually fit for purpose and will just instantly be discarded. Okay. Anybody who's trying to write in plain English, if you ever tried to do this, it's a surprisingly difficult thing to do. Trying to write in simple English, and advice for anybody at a college, university, and you're trying to write really, really engaging content, do it in plain English. The more simply you can write, the easier it is to access that information for anybody reading it. If you're doing emails, any important documents, write it in simple, plain English. If you use this thing CEFR, which is well known across Europe, and it was a thing I'd never heard of before, it basically explains what a learner in a language should be able to do. So you've got different levels of languages for a new learner, and it goes from A1 up to C2. So an A1 learner would be somebody who's just starting off learning a language. A C2 learner would be an expert. And if you use this in your prompt writing, it will give you really nuanced responses. So rather than having a very wordy, complicated document, you can actually just really slim it down and simplify the language by using these steps. So our colleagues in Europe and other agencies write at a B2 level, which we actually think is a little bit high. That's more like somebody who is 17, 18 years old, maybe doing A-level kind of level of language. We want to write at a simpler level. If I can write a question that can be understood by a child at primary school, then I know I'm doing a good job. So that's the level I want to aim for to make it as accessible as possible. So I'll give you an example. So these are just what came out of the AI using these CEFR levels. Exactly as they came out, haven't modified anything. And we generate them lots of answer options, at least 6, but sometimes maybe 10 different answer options, and we just pick the best ones. So here we go. So this is expert level English. So if anybody's not a great reader, they might struggle with this. You might all find this easy, you might not. Some of the words in there are not overly accessible. We would never use them. So a little illustration there. All the stuff in pink, I'm going to reject straight away. I'm going to find better verbs that are clearer and easier to understand. So I'm going to go down to level B1. Straight away, I'm thinking, wow, this looks much more accessible. We've got rid of the previously complicated language. We'll just go back a second. It's reduced the word count. It's using different verbs. Much simpler language. Is it ready to go into the test? No, not quite. I've still got to do a little bit of editing. Okay, so we wouldn't say increase your speed. We say go faster, speed up. It's simpler, it's easier to understand. I wouldn't say sound your horn to alert them. If you're learning to drive, you should know what the horn is for. I wouldn't say overtake immediately. Maybe overtake as soon as possible. Can you overtake a pedestrian? No, not really. Might just get rid of that. It doesn't really work very well as an answer. Flash your headlights. I don't need why we flash headlights. You should know that. So we just think about how we can simplify it and reduce that word count. Go down a level again. For some reason, the AI at this point decided to become very American in its language, so it's now introduced neighborhood and kids. I've got a bit of a reaction to that. I don't like neighborhood, so I'd say a housing estate, or you're driving down the street. Much easier to understand. Honk your horn, that's not a word we would tend to use. We'd use sound your horn. That's a bit more normal language. So there's a little bit of work to do on that one. And I go down to the lowest level that I've got the question at, level A1. And actually now this is pretty close to being a fully formed question. Okay, what can I do differently with this? Well, if I'm sounding the horn, the meaning of a horn when you sound isn't to play with people in the street. And I wouldn't flash my headlights to say hello generally, so that's not quite right. I'd be taking those bits out. But actually, I've got really a pretty simple, very easy to understand question, which is in an immersive format, very easy to translate into BSL, which is another consideration for us. It's actually a really easy, simple question to understand. Anybody's learning to drive at the moment, you're thinking the theory test is complicated, it's not. It's really, questions like this, they're all really simple. We make them as easy as we possibly can. Read your highway code, you will not find this difficult. So the big advantage for us, we can just get lots and lots of content generated really, really quickly, get together as a team, and work out which ones are going to work and which ones we're going to reject. And the AI thinks in really novel ways. It comes with really unusual ideas. One of the things that really is a big problem for us is we're very siloed in our thinking. And when you're writing questions, we always end up using the same, what we call distractors, the same answer options over and over again. We always default to stick on your hazard warning lights or sound your horn. And it's just, we can't get past that. AI doesn't do that. It gives you really interesting ideas. And some of them you think, wow, that's a really different idea. Let's go with that. So we get much more novel question writing. Gets us off the blank page really quickly, gets us lots of content very, very quickly, makes us more efficient. So that's how we're using it in theory test. Thank you.
So you can see there a real example of how Greg started off with artificial intelligence. And in the early days, when we were playing around with artificial intelligence, we tried it in some of the graphics. And we don't want to put the picture, we want to sort of switch everybody off AI, but it did some really, really bizarre things. So it's taken Greg and the team to really take what the opportunity of artificial intelligence is and learn, clearly Greg is an expert in writing questions, but actually how you complement what artificial intelligence can do and how you add other things to it to get it to a level that it's fit for purpose for the customers that are going to use it. So now you know how all the questions are made. Good luck with that. But I think it's important is you shouldn't go blindly into artificial intelligence and just accept what it put out. I think Greg and the team, they started off, I did know that they were up to doing it, it wasn't quite at that thing. But I think if we'd said, can we use artificial intelligence to write theory test questions, what would the answer be, Greg? No. No. So the organisation didn't believe that artificial intelligence could write the questions, and if we'd have gone through the proper governance, the answer would have been no. So I'm really pleased that Greg set off and doing that. So that's the end of it. I think somebody's going to wrap up, hopefully. So thank you for listening to us, and hopefully if anybody is about to take the theory test, thank you for the £23. Do it once, and if you do it twice, thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.